Black coffee, no sugar. The voice, low and dangerous, cut through the diner's clatter, but Maya barely registered it. Her gaze was locked on his hand, a jagged, star-shaped scar, just like Mom's feverish stories. Addie, the boy from the lake. It couldn't be. This man, Adrian Beaumont, CEO of everything in her diner? He shifted, hiding the scar. He knows I saw it. Rage coiled in Maya's gut, her mother frail, fading, while a secret, buried for decades, and a promise broken. They think they silenced her. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. This isn't about money anymore. Not really. Black coffee, no sugar. The voice, low and dangerous, cut through the diner's clatter, but Maya barely registered it. Her gaze was locked on his hand, a jagged, star-shaped scar, just like Mom's feverish stories. Addie, the boy from the lake. It couldn't be. This man, Adrian Beaumont, CEO of everything, in her diner? He shifted, hiding the scar. He knows I saw it. Rage coiled in Maya's gut, her mother frail, fading, while a secret, buried for decades, and a promise broken. They think they silenced her. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. This isn't about money anymore. Not really. The scent of burnt coffee beans and stale grease clung to everything in the corner perk, a smell Maya had long ago stopped noticing. Her world had shrunk to the size of her mother's hospital bills and the next shift on the schedule. She moved through the diner like a ghost, a silent waitress in a faded uniform, perpetually exhausted. Each day was a blur of mumbled orders, lukewarm tips, and the gnawing anxiety that ate away at her. Then he walked in. Not walked, precisely. He arrived, as if summoned by some unseen force. The bell above the door gave a pathetic little tinkle that was swallowed whole by the sheer presence of the man. Conversation died. Forks clattered to plates. Even Saul, her eternally frazzled boss, straightened his tie and plastered on a servile smile. He was a monument carved from money and shadow, a charcoal suit molded perfectly to his powerful frame, hair the color of iron kissed with silver at the temples. His face was a glacial mask, handsome and utterly unreadable. This was a man who commanded boardrooms, not greasy spoons. Balancing a precarious stack of plates, Maya felt a jolt, a primal awareness that rippled through the diner. She glanced at Saul, who was already ushering the Titan towards booth 4, his eyes wide with panic. "Maya, you take this one! Look sharp!" Resentment flared. She was already working a double, her feet aching, her patience frayed. But the fear in Saul's eyes was a familiar pressure. She plastered on her practiced smile and navigated the cramped aisles, each step a carefully calculated maneuver. "Welcome to the corner perk," she recited, placing a menu and a glass of water on the table. "Can I get you started with something to drink? Coffee's fresh." He didn't even glance at the menu. His gaze was fixed on the grimy window, his expression detached. "Black coffee, no sugar," he stated, his voice a low, resonant rumble that vibrated through her. "Coming right up," she said, turning to the coffee machine. The silence in the diner was oppressive. Every eye was on him. She recognized him then, from the glossy magazines her mother sometimes read. Adrian Beaumont, the titan of Beaumont Industries. What was he doing here in this forgotten corner of the city? She returned with the coffee, setting the mug down with a carefulness born of years of experience. And then she saw it, his hand, large, powerful, impeccably groomed. But on the back of it, a starburst of pale, puckered flesh marred the smooth skin. A jagged, star-shaped scar. The world seemed to tilt. The diner's clamor faded into a distant hum. Boat engine, terrible noise. Stars right there on his hand. "I made the stars go away, baby. I pushed him away from the fire." Her mother's words, slurred with pain and medication, echoed in her mind. Fragments of feverish bedtime stories, dismissed for years as the ramblings of a failing mind. Her mother, Catherine, ravaged by a disease that stole her memories, her strength, her very essence. Stories of a big house by a lake, a boy named Addie, a promise, and always the scar. Maya stared, her breath catching in her throat. The scar on Adrian Beaumont's hand. It was identical. The shape, the placement, the faint tracery of old burns radiating outwards. It couldn't be a coincidence. Her hand trembled, and a drop of hot coffee splashed onto the table. Beaumont's eyes snapped to her, a startlingly cold gray. He saw her staring. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. He subtly shifted, his hand disappearing partially beneath the cuff of his expensive suit. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice sharp, cutting through the haze of her shock. A flush of embarrassment burned on her cheeks. "No, sir. No problem. I'm sorry," she fumbled for a napkin, her mind racing. Was it possible? Could this impossibly wealthy man be the little boy from her mother's past? The boy she claimed to have saved? I'll be right back to take your order," she stammered, backing away like a frightened animal. She fled to the kitchen, the stainless steel counter cool against her trembling hands. "You okay, kid?" Gus the cook asked, his brow furrowed. "You look like you've seen a ghost." A ghost from a life her mother had locked away, a life that existed only in whispers and shadows. The stories had always been a painful fantasy, a glimpse into a world where her mother was strong, not fading. But that scar was real. It was a memory etched onto his skin, a memory he seemed determined to bury. Through the service window, she watched him stir his coffee, an island of power and wealth in her mundane world. A fierce protectiveness, a burning anger bloomed within her, eclipsing the shock. Her mother was dying, drowning in debt. And this man, the boy her mother had saved, if the stories were true, sat there untouched by suffering. Did he even remember her? Did he know the fate of the girl who had given him that scar? Saul poked his head into the kitchen. "What are you doing?" "He's waiting. Go take his order." Taking a deep breath, Maya smoothed her apron. This was more than a coincidence. It was a chance, a 1 in a billion shot. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a daughter on the verge of uncovering a truth buried for decades. She walked back to booth 4, her steps deliberate, her resolve hardening with each stride. The practiced smile was gone, replaced by a quiet, intense determination. Adrian Beaumont looked up, a flicker of annoyance in his cold eyes. "Have you decided?" she asked, her voice steady despite the frantic drumbeat of her pulse. "Just a cheeseburger," he said dismissively, as if the choice were a burden. "A cheeseburger," she repeated, scribbling it on her notepad. Then she looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "It's a funny thing, memory, don't you think?" His eyebrows knitted together in a frown. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "That scar on your hand," Maya pressed, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "My mother used to tell me stories about it, about a boat engine, a fire, and a little boy named Addie." The silver spoon in Adrian Beaumont's hand stopped stirring. The silence in booth 4 was deafening. Slowly he lifted his head. For the first time since he had walked in, the mask of cold indifference cracked. In its place, a look of profound disbelief flickered across his face. Shock was the most prominent, but underneath it, a deep, guarded suspicion simmered. He slowly placed the spoon on the table, the faint clink echoing in the sudden stillness. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Not a question, but an interrogation. "My name is Maya Peterson," she said, her own voice barely a whisper, yet it felt like a shout. "My mother is Catherine Peterson." He stared at her, his gray eyes searching her face, as if trying to decipher a complex code. The name Catherine Peterson drew a blank. His expression tightened, disbelief hardening back into a shield of cold skepticism. "I don't know anyone by that name. But you were called Addie, weren't you?" Maya pressed, her desperation making her bold. "And you were on a boat on Lake Anterero. It was the summer you turned 10. Every detail she spoke was a blow, visibly landing on him. The mention of Lake Anterero, the nickname he hadn't heard in decades, made his jaw clench. He had built an empire on controlling information, on knowing everything about everyone he dealt with. To have this waitress, this girl with tired eyes and a cheap apron, recite the details of his most traumatic childhood memory was deeply unnerving. He saw her not as a person, but as a threat, a grifter, someone who had somehow unearthed a piece of his sealed past and was now trying to leverage it. "I think you've made a mistake," he said, his tone glacial. He reached into his suit jacket, pulled out a slim black wallet, and tossed several $100 bills onto the table. More than enough to cover 100 cheeseburgers. A dismissal. For your trouble, he stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow over her. He was about to walk away, to leave her standing there with her heart in her throat and his money on the table. She saved your life, Maya said, the words tumbling out, raw and accusatory. The shrapnel from the engine would have hit you. She pushed you out of the way. It cut her arm too. But she always worried about you, about the boy with the star on his hand. Adrian froze, his back to her. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, without turning around, he spoke. Whoever your source is, they're very good, but you are mistaken. He walked away without another word, a man retreating behind fortress walls. The bell above the door chimed his exit. He was gone, leaving behind a stunned diner and a small pile of money that felt like an insult. Maya stood trembling, staring at the cash on the table, a stark testament to the chasm between their worlds. He hadn't denied it, not really. He had deflected, dismissed, and paid her off. But he hadn't said she was wrong. He knows what he did and knows that she holds the truth. Maya was no longer just digging for the truth. She was excavating a buried life, and she had a feeling the Beaumont family had left more than one skeleton behind. Longer just digging for the truth. She was excavating a buried life, and she had a feeling the Beaumont family had left more than one skeleton behind. The archives of the Beaumont family were not stored on a cloud server or a modern hard drive. They were housed in a climate-controlled vault in the Subantro, a sprawling Gothic mansion that Adrian now rarely visited. It took Finch 2 days to get the access codes and another full day to locate the relevant files buried deep within rows of gray anonymous filing cabinets. When Finch finally presented the file to Adrian, it felt heavier than its meager half-inch thickness would suggest. The label typed on an old-fashioned typewriter read, Estate Incident, August 911. Internal Resolution. Adrian opened it. The cold legalistic language of the documents was a stark contrast to the chaotic, sun-drenched memories of that summer. He was the minor. The incident was an unfortunate mechanical failure, and the resolution was a private settlement. And there it was, a non-disclosure agreement of terrifying scope and permanence, signed by 3 people. Michael Connolly, Maria Connolly, and their daughter Catherine Connolly. The settlement amount was substantial for the time, $250,000. In exchange, the Connolly family agreed to relinquish their employment, vacate the estate property immediately, and never again make contact with any member of the Beaumont family. They agreed to never speak of the incident or their relationship with the Beaumonts to anyone under penalty of severe legal and financial repercussions. It was a gag order for life. The signature at the bottom authorizing the payment was his father's Walter Beaumont, crisp, arrogant, and final. As Adrian read, the stark, unforgiving print, the black and white text dissolved, and the colors of that summer bled through vivid and painful. Summer 1991. He was 10 years old, a solitary boy named Addie, lost in the cavernous halls of the Lake Anterero estate. His father was a phantom, always in his study or on the phone. His mother was a fragile, medicated presence who floated through the days in a silk dressing gown. Adrian's life was one of tutors and timetables, a gilded cage. Then came Katie. Catherine Connolly, or Katie, was the daughter of the head groundskeeper. She was a year older than him, a wild thing with hair the color of a sunset, knees permanently scuffed, and a laugh that could startle birds from the trees. She knew the woods behind the estate like the back of her hand. She taught him how to skip stones so they'd bounce 7 times, how to find the best wild raspberries, and how to carve little figures out of soft pine wood with her father's pocket knife. She was the only person who didn't care that he was a Beaumont. To her, he was just Addie. She treated him not with the difference of the other staff, but with the boisterous, challenging affection of a true friend. For the first time in his life, Adrian didn't feel like an heir. He just felt like a boy. His most treasured possession from that summer was a small, crudely carved wooden bird she had made for him. He had kept it for years, hidden away like a secret until his father had found it and dismissed it as sentimental clutter during one of their moves. The day of the accident was bright and hot. They had borrowed one of the smaller motorboats, something they were strictly forbidden from doing. It was Katie's idea, of course. She was always the brave one. They were out in the middle of the lake, the sun beating down, their laughter echoing across the water. Adrian was at the stern trying to fix a fishing line when it happened. A sputtering cough from the outboard motor, a plume of black smoke, and then a deafening bang. He remembered a wave of intense heat and the sight of a gleaming piece of metal, a shard from the engine casing, spinning through the air directly at his face. He was frozen a fly in amber, but Katie wasn't. She moved with an impossible speed, launching herself at him, shoving him sideways. Her body slammed into his, sending them both tumbling towards the edge of the boat. The piece of shrapnel missed his head by inches, slicing across the back of his hand, instead carving a star-shaped gash into his skin. He remembered the shock of the pain, the sight of his own blood, and Katie's scream as another, smaller piece caught her upper arm. Then they were in the water. The boat was on fire, and the world was chaos. He remembered her holding on to him, even though she was hurt, treading water and yelling for help until the estate staff reached them in another boat. The aftermath was a blur of doctors' bandages and his father's cold, furious face. He was confined to his room, and when he asked for Katie, he was told she was fine, but that he was not to see her. A week later, his father sat him down in his study. "The Connollys are gone, Adrian," Walter had said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "The accident was their fault. Negligence. They were lucky I didn't have them charged. I gave them a generous sum of money to relocate and start over. It's for the best. We don't associate with people like that. It was a lesson in choosing your friends more carefully." Adrian, 10 years old and terrified of his father, had accepted it. He'd buried the memory of Katie under layers of duty ambition and the relentless pressure to become the man his father demanded. He allowed himself to believe the lie because it was easier. He let a small, bitter seed of resentment grow the idea that Katie and her family had simply taken the money and run that their friendship had a price tag. Now sitting in his sterile office 34 years later, holding the document that was her life sentence, he felt the full crushing weight of his father's cruelty. This wasn't a settlement, it was an exile. They hadn't just paid her off. They had threatened a working-class family with legal ruin and forced them into silence. They had erased a brave, laughing girl named Katie Connolly and replaced her with a ghost named Catherine Peterson. And he, Adrian Beaumont, had let it happen. He had believed the lie because it was convenient, and he had spent more than 3 decades building an empire on a foundation that was rotten with deceit. He looked at his scar. It was no longer a symbol of a childhood accident. It was a brand, a permanent reminder of his own ignorance and the profound debt he owed to a girl he had left behind. He buzzed his intercom. "Finch," he said, his voice tight and raw. "Get the jet ready. I'm going to Chicago. Find an address for a Deborah Alley and run a search for any and all specialists in corticobasal degeneration. The best in the world. I don't care what it costs." He was no longer investigating a potential grifter. He was beginning a rescue mission 34 years too late. While Adrian was flying to Chicago on his private jet, Maya was taking a bus. The 13-hour ride was a grueling, sleepless journey fueled by stale coffee and a burning sense of purpose. She had used a portion of Adrian's hush money to fund the trip, an irony that was not lost on her. She'd found a possible address for Deborah O'Malley through an online people finder service. A long shot, but the only one she had. She found the address in a quiet tree-lined suburb. The house was a modest but well-kept bungalow with a garden full of blooming roses. Maya's heart hammered as she walked up the path and rang the doorbell. The woman who answered was in her late 50s with kind eyes and the same warm smile Maya had seen in the old photograph. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Are you Deborah Alley?" Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I am." Maya took a deep breath. "My name is Maya Peterson. I think you were friends with my mother a long time ago. Her name was Catherine Connolly." Deborah's friendly expression dissolved, replaced by the same look of shock Maya had seen on Adrian Bowman's face. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Katie," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh my God, Katie Connolly. I haven't heard that name in 30 years. Is she all right?" Over the next 2 hours, sitting in Deborah's cozy living room with a cup of tea, she couldn't drink. Maya learned the full story from an outsider's perspective. Deb and Catherine had been best friends since kindergarten. She described the Catherine she knew vibrant, fearless, and fiercely loyal. She talked about the summer at the Beaumont estate, about how excited Catherine had been to have a real friend in the lonely rich boy Addie. She adored that boy, Deb said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. It wasn't a crush. Not really. It was deeper. They were two lonely kids who found each other. She used to carve him little things, animals and such. There was this one, a little bird that he loved. Maya's mind flashed. A bird? Her mother had sometimes mumbled about a bird. Deb's tone turned bitter as she recounted the aftermath of the accident. It was a nightmare, Maya. Her parents were terrified. Walter Beaumont. That man was a monster. He came to their little cottage on the estate with two lawyers. He accused Mr. Connolly of negligence, of failing to maintain the boat, threatened to sue them into oblivion, have him blacklisted from ever working again. They were simple working people. They had nothing, so they offered the money. Maya finished the pieces, clicking into place. It wasn't an offer. Deb corrected her voice sharp. It was a command. Take this money, change your names and disappear, or I will ruin you. They made Katie sign it too. She was only 21. They made her sign away her own name. She called me from a payphone a week later, sobbing, said she was Catherine Peterson now that she could never see or speak to me again. That was the last time I ever heard from her. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it left Maya breathless. They hadn't just silenced her mother. They had dismantled her entire life piece by piece. There's one more thing, Maya said, her voice low. She pulled the shoebox from her tote bag. My mother kept this. I think she wanted to throw it away, but she couldn't. She sifted through the contents, her fingers finally closing around a small, hard object wrapped in a piece of yellowed cloth at the very bottom. She hadn't noticed it before, hidden so deep. She unwrapped it. It was a small wooden bird, no bigger than her thumb. It was crudely carved, the knife mark still visible, but there was a definite charm to it. The wood was worn smooth from years of being held. Deb gasped. That's it. That's the bird she carved for Addie. He must have given it back to her for safekeeping before they went out on the boat that day. Oh, Katie, to think she kept it all these years. Maya held the bird in her palm. It felt like the weight of the entire past had settled in her hand. This little piece of wood wasn't just a trinket. It was the one object that tied her mother and Adrian Beaumont together. It was irrefutable proof of their friendship, a relic from a time before the lawyers and the lies. It was a truth you could hold. She now knew what she had to do. Confronting Adrian Beaumont with just a story was one thing. He could dismiss it, deny it, pay his way out of it, but he couldn't deny this. As Mir was making this discovery, Adrian was sitting in a sterile Chicago law office. Finch had tracked down the Connolly family's lawyer from 1991, now a stooped elderly man named Peterson. A chilling coincidence. After some persuasion involving a significant donation to his retirement fund, the old lawyer had confirmed everything. He even remembered the girl Catherine. Frightened kid, he'd mumbled. Her parents were even more scared. The Beaumont lawyer he played rough left them with no choice. The confirmation settled like a block of ice in Adrian's stomach. There was no ambiguity left, no room for doubt. It was all true. His father had orchestrated the entire cover-up with brutal efficiency. Finch entered the room, his face grim. Sir, I've located Catherine Peterson. She's living in a low-income apartment building back in the city. And sir, her medical records are extensive. It's not good. Adrian stood up, his fists clenched. Book the flight back now. Maya arrived back home the next morning exhausted but resolute. The wooden bird was safely in her pocket. As she walked up to her apartment building, a sleek black town car with tinted windows was parked at the curb. A man in a dark suit. Robert Finch stood waiting by the entrance. Ms. Peterson, he asked, his voice polite but firm. Maya stopped her guard immediately up. Who are you? My name is Robert Finch. I work for Mr. Beaumont, he said. He would like to see you. He asked if you would be willing to meet him at his office. The moment had come. Maya clutched the wooden bird in her pocket. Tell him I'll be there in 1 hour, she said, her voice clear and steady. But the meeting will be on my terms. She wasn't going into the lion's den as a waitress asking for a handout. She was going in as Catherine Connie's daughter, and she was bringing 34 years of silence with her. The Beaumont Industries headquarters was a skyscraper of steel and glass that stabbed at the sky, a monument to ruthless ambition. Maya felt impossibly small as she walked through the cavernous marble lobby, her sensible shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. Finch met her and escorted her to a private elevator that ascended in unnerving silence. Adrian Beaumont's office was less an office and more a kingdom. The view was panoramic. The furniture was minimalist and brutally expensive, and the man himself stood by the window, his back to her, looking down on the city he owned. "Miss Peterson," he said, turning around. His face was etched with a tension that hadn't been there in the diner. The cold mask was gone, replaced by something more complex: weariness, regret, and a flicker of apprehension. "Thank you for coming. I'm not here for you," Maya said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast room. "I'm here for my mother." "I know," he said quietly. "I've been looking into what happened at Lake Ontario." Looking into it, Maya's voice dripped with incredulity. "You were there. You lived it. Or did you forget I didn't forget?" Adrian said, his voice raw. "I was told a lie. I was 10 years old and I believed my father when he said your mother and her family had been taken care of, that they had left willingly. They were exiled. Maya shot back, taking a step forward. "Your father threatened them. He terrified them into signing away their own names, their own lives. My mother became a ghost so that the great Beaumont family wouldn't have to deal with an inconvenience." Adrian flinched as if she had struck him. Every word was the truth, and he had no defense. "I know that now, and I am sorry. That word is inadequate. I know it is. But I am sorry doesn't pay for my mother's medication," Maya said, her anger finally boiling over. "It doesn't give her back the 34 years she spent looking over her shoulder, terrified that one of your father's lawyers would show up and punish her for simply existing. It doesn't heal her." She saw a flicker of the old powerful Beaumont in his eyes, a defensiveness that rose instinctively. He was a man accustomed to solutions to transactions. He was about to speak, perhaps, to offer money to lay out a plan, but Maya didn't give him the chance. She reached into her pocket. "My mother's memories are fading. She gets confused. But there are moments that her heart remembers even when her mind can't. She used to talk about a boy named Addie, and she used to talk about a bird." She opened her hand. Resting in her palm was the small, worn wooden bird. Adrian stared at it. All the air seemed to leave the room. He took a hesitant step forward, then another, his eyes locked on the tiny carving. The multi-billion-dollar corporation, the city spread out below the weight of his empire. It all vanished. He was 10 years old again, sitting on a sun-drenched dock with a girl with auburn hair, watching her small, nimble fingers carve a piece of scrap pine into a treasure. "I thought I'd lost it," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. It was more than just memory. It was grief. Grief for the boy he had been and for the friend he had lost. He reached out a trembling hand, not to take the bird, but just to hover his fingers over it as if it might disappear. The wooden bird had shattered his final defense. It was a tangible piece of their shared past, a testament to a friendship his father had tried to obliterate. It was proof that before the money and the lawyers, there was just Addie and Katie. "I want you to see her," Maya said, her voice softening slightly. The sight of his raw vulnerability had chipped away at her anger, leaving a core of profound sadness. Adrian finally looked up from the bird, his gray eyes shining with unshed tears. He nodded, unable to speak. The visit to the apartment was surreal. The titan of industry, Adrian Beaumont, looked entirely out of place in the small, cluttered living room that smelled of lavender air freshener and illness. Catherine was in her armchair, dozing. Maya gently woke her. "Mama, there's someone here to see you." Catherine's eyes fluttered open. They settled on Adrian, who stood awkwardly in the doorway. There was no recognition at first, just the vague confusion she often had with strangers. Adrian slowly walked over and knelt before her chair, much as Maya had done. He was now at eye level with the frail woman who had once saved his life. "Hello, Katie," he said softly, using the name he hadn't spoken in over 3 decades. Catherine's eyes widened. The name spoken in that deep voice seemed to bypass the damaged pathways of her brain and strike a deep resonant chord within her soul. Her gaze flickered down to his hand, which rested on the arm of her chair. She saw the pale star-shaped scar. Her own hand, gnarled and weak, lifted and shakily traced the outline of the scar. "The stars," she whispered, her voice, a fragile rustle of leaves. "I made the stars go away." Tears streamed down Adrian's face. He didn't try to wipe them away. "Yes, you did," he choked out. "You saved me, Katie." For a moment, the fog of her illness cleared completely. She was no longer Catherine Peterson, the invalid. She was Katie Connolly, the brave girl from the lake. And he was not Adrian Beaumont, the billionaire. He was Addie, her friend. "Your father," she said, her voice suddenly clear and lucid, filled with a distant remembered fear. "He was a hard man. He said we had to go for your own good. He said you would be better off without us. A clean break." She looked at Adrian, her eyes pleading. "I didn't want to leave you, Addie. I never wanted to leave." This was the final brutal truth. His father had not only exiled her, he had poisoned the memory of their friendship, telling each of them that the other was better off without them. It was a calculated act of emotional vandalism. Adrian had been made to believe she'd abandoned him for money. She had been made to believe she was a danger to his future. It was a lie designed to keep them apart forever. "He was wrong," Adrian said, taking her frail hand in his. "He was wrong about everything." He looked up at Maya, who was watching them, tears silently tracking down her own cheeks. In that moment, the debt was clear. It wasn't about money, it was about time, about a life stolen, about a truth that had finally, painfully been brought into the light. The reunion was not an ending, but a reckoning. It was the moment the past finally caught up with the present, demanding to be heard. The days that followed were a whirlwind of decisive action. Immediately, Adrian moved Catherine to the finest neurological clinic in the country, ensuring she was attended by the world's leading specialists. While her condition was incurable, the new level of care brought her a comfort and peace she hadn't known in years. But his atonement went beyond money. Adrian became a constant presence, visiting Catherine daily. In her lucid moments, they spoke of that long-lost summer, piecing together the fragments of their friendship in a quiet healing ritual. Confronting his elderly, unrepentant father only strengthened Adrian's resolve. He announced the sale of the Lake Ontario estate, the very symbol of their family's cruelty, to fund the Catherine Connolly Foundation, a new organization dedicated to fighting the kind of corporate injustice she had suffered. The place where her life was dismantled would now serve to rebuild the lives of others. He approached Mir not with charity, but with what he called overdue restitution. He established a trust that would secure her future and paid for her to return to college. Maya chose to study social work, determined to use her experience to help others. One day, her old boss at the diner found his debts mysteriously paid off. The bond between Maya and Adrian solidified into a deep, familial friendship. He carved a new wooden bird for Catherine One, with its wings outstretched in flight. Seeing her hold the old hidden bird in one hand and the new hopeful one in the other was the truest sign of their new beginning. The past could never be erased, but its wounds could finally be exposed to the daylight, and a debt buried in fear was finally being repaid with dignity and grace. The story of Maya, Adrian, and Catherine is a powerful reminder that the past is never truly buried. It lives on in scars, in memories, and in the quiet courage of those who refuse to be forgotten. It shows us that a single moment of bravery can echo for a lifetime, and that true atonement is about more than just apologies. It's about action, restitution, and the difficult work of making things right. Their journey from a greasy spoon diner to a place of healing and justice proves that beneath the surface of our ordinary lives, extraordinary stories of secrets, survival, and redemption are waiting to be told. If this story of a hidden past and a daughter's relentless quest for truth moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share it with someone who loves a story of unexpected twists and profound human connection. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into a story that feels stranger than fiction. What secrets do you think are hidden in plain sight all around us? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening.